Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers.
Right? No judging.
Yeah.
No judging.
And the millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby,
Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers. Justin Fox, Patrick McGowan. Patrick, thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
Glad to be here, man.
Awesome. So we did talk, just all those viewers might be a little choppy. We're dealing with some internet technical issues, but hopefully we can get through this. Patrick, I'll do a quick intro. So Pat, you're the CEO and co-founder of Blackbox.global, which is a global creator ecosystem and platform. Your mission is creator freedom. So why don't we start? We've obviously had a bunch of different conversations about sort of where Blackbox goes, how potentially backers can support Blackbox, and how, you know, some different ideas around launching and raising capital on backers for Blackbox. Why don't we talk a little bit about what is Blackbox? What is creator freedom? Dive right in.
It's pretty simple. I mean, anybody who works in the creative industries, they got into it because they wanted to do what they really love to do. They want to be with people that they want to be with. They want to be in this dynamic, creative environment. And it's not, you know, when people start out young in this industry, they're willing to give it up. They're willing to pay their dues. They don't expect to get rich. I mean, most people that I know in the industry didn't come into it to make money. They came into it to do what they love. And but there comes a point where you start wondering when I'll be fairly compensated. And then we hear the stories about, you know, the star syndrome as well. So what I did after, you know, 30 years plus in the industry is I had this realization about 5 years ago that my value selling time was far less than my value selling concept, idea, and content.
Right.
And so I embarked on this journey to try to build an ecosystem, a community, a platform, an economic model, and a business model that allows creators to do exactly what they set out to do what they want, where they want, with who they want, to be involved in projects that really energize them, and then to take a part ownership, to take an equity position with regards to the rights and royalties and the revenue that content can generate. So it's like this really interesting confluence of what people are calling the creator economy. Well, the creator economy has been around for hundreds of years. It's no different than it's ever been. We had patronage models in the in the classical era. It moved into more commercial models, and we got into broadcast, film, radio. And, you know, there's really nothing that's changed in that regard. It's just the mode of delivery has changed. So now we've got this creator economy, and people are building tools and ways for people to be independent and to have that freedom. So what we said is, well, let's see if we can build an entire ecosystem around this. It starts with idea, moves to team, moves to content, moves to the business side, because a lot of creators forget about the business side, that they're wired to do content. And then we want to have them be in a comfortable, trusted, secure environment where when their content generates revenue from the open market through whatever means, it can be through streaming, it can be through subscription, it can be through standard licensing, or even stock footage, which is a big part of how we built our business. And we want them to have the ability to participate as partners. Right. So not as workers, not as hourly workers or daily workers, or I'm hiring you as an actor, I'm giving you a fee, you're not going to get residuals on this one. Sometimes actors do and don't. It depends.
Right.
But anyways, we want everybody to be participatory in the content rights ownership.
Right.
And we deal with everything else, and then they get their piece of the waterfall. So it's really that simple: idea, content, audience, money, waterfall. That's Blackbox.
Right. So I think it's really cool too. I mean, it's sort of that shared, fractionalization of ownership of the creation, not just for maybe the main players where you said, yes, sometimes the actors might get, and the content we're talking about is all content, right? So talking about, music, movies, you talked about, pictures or digital kind of content, right? And everything, right? So, you typically have multiple people that kind of potentially are creators of that content, but usually, in the current format, only typically one or a main owner would get sort of the revenue, and they might disperse it, but it's in not a very structured manner. It's interesting. I think one of the things that we've talked about, and I'd love to kind of go dive right into it as well, is one of the points that, we've sort of talked about with backers is the ability to, for content to be created as a shared objective, whereby there's not necessarily an outlay of cash, if you will, up front, where everyone now can participate on the back end, and sort of you're investing the time for that back end reward. Tell us a little bit about the thought process on that, or because I think, and I want to dive in. You mentioned that you guys are in the process of releasing something, or I believe it's released or releasing content that was created in that fashion, correct?
Right. Well, okay. So this is core. This is absolutely core to our business model, where we say, if you come out and you participate in making of content in whatever role you have, okay,
as big or small.
I mean, you could be the cook on a film shoot.
Right.
You could be an actor. You could be the video or the shooter, the DOP or the cinematographer. You can be the editor. You can be the graphics, one of the animation team, right? It doesn't matter. All of these projects are made from human effort using tools.
Right.
Period. And there's, other things like location fees, and of course there's script writing. So these are all elements. They're all, big features. You look at the credits list, you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of people sometimes.
Just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
So, but almost all of those people have been paid a gig fee or a contract fee, or they work for a company that's providing services and they're on salary to that company.
Right.
Very, very few of those hundreds of people have a stake.
A performance type, a stake in the project and performance type bonus or pay.
So there's also incentives here, right? So, how incented are you? Well, you're going to do a good job, you're a professional.
Right.
But if you own a piece of the project and you know that there's a chance that you're actually going to make 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times as much money as your gig fee would have been, if this thing really takes off and it's a big hit. And I think that's, interesting. I'm hoping not breaking up too much here.
No, it's okay. Your audio is perfect. So even if the visuals, the audio is fine. So they just see a bit of a blur, kind of like, it's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
So, I like to use agricultural analogies sometimes. Okay. This is no different than a co-op farm, right?
Right.
Where people bring in, the seeds, the fertilizer, the water, the labor, the tilling, the land itself, the machinery, the fuel, all of those inputs. Those are known as inputs in the agricultural industry, and it's no different in the content creation industry. So what we do is we try to make as many of the inputs, or the entities or the people that are representing those inputs and providing those inputs, to be fractional rights holders on the revenue side. So if you make a Batman movie and it's killer and it's just totally awesome, you're right. The guy that was pulling focus as a first AC, as a first assistant camera on that film, would normally come out for $350 to $550 a day, roughly. And so instead, he can make a decision and say, look, I'm going to do this 10 or 15 day shoot, and I'm going to be an investor in this, a partner in this picture. Now, that's not going to happen overnight. People have to graduate in, right? What we're basically saying is we're going to make right now, passive income is a secondary source of revenue for many creators. but they all dream to have it be their primary source.
Right.
So we're going to say, okay, your primary source is gig or employment. Now your secondary source is passive. We're going to build a path for you to do this.
To reverse it.
The secondary because the primary. And
right.
now you can choose the project. You can choose the team. You don't have to take the next gig that's being thrown at you. And here's, this varies depending on market and economic conditions. But everybody I talk to in the industry at every level will tell you rates have not gone up in our industry for 25 to 35 years.
Right.
And that's a generation of stale rate, right? Everything else has gone up.
Yeah, and their costs have definitely gone up for sure, right?
Everybody's costs have gone up, but the rates for labor in our industry have not gone up.
Right.
Period.
Right.
So, I lived through that. I ran a business. I ran a pretty big production company in Ottawa, and we were doing government work, advertising work, all kinds of stuff. When I started in the industry in '89, the rate was X to do a given job. When I left that side of the industry to build Black Box in 2017, it was still the same. The rate was still the same.
Right.
So it just didn't make sense to me. But at the same time, the amount of content that is generating a lot of revenue for rights holders, and you touched on this earlier, he who owns the rights owns the spoils.
Right.
He who owns the rights gets the upside of that content. They may have to absorb some of the downside in order to get those rights, and that's typically how things are done.
Right.
But there is an opportunity here to change this game based on the same technology that's being used to democratize content processing, right?
Right.
So a lot of people like to throw that term around, democratization or creator economy. Like I said, this business has always been the same. Rights holders put a project together, the rights are delivered to them in return for fees. They now go and take those rights to market in the product. Right. It's been the same in the music industry, the publishing industry, any content industry you can name or think of. It's the same deal.
Yeah.
However, there's been this massive evolution in the technical delivery of content, the actual business models for consumption in terms of subscription platforms like Netflix, AVOD platforms like Tubi. YouTube is an AVOD platform that wants to be a subscription platform.
Right.
And those guys make the rules in the marketplace. So, but YouTube's a great example of where creators come in and are actual partners with YouTube.
Right.
Some people think YouTube keeps too much, but hey, YouTube's YouTube, right? You got to live with it. Whereas with Netflix is more interested in having the rights. Disney is more interested in having the rights because they now have a body of content that they can have new viewers view a time and time and time for years.
Right.
Years and years and years, this can have value in the marketplace. So if you worked on Gilligan's Island, or your grandfather worked on Gilligan's Island, right?
Right.
And he
had, I was just talking about Gilligan's Island probably about 2 or 3 days ago. Yeah, we were talking about the end, the last episode. Anyways, but yeah. And the funny thing is, was it with you maybe? And they're saying they didn't get paid. So the people on the show apparently didn't get paid.
Well, so that's the risk of being a contractor. You're an independent contractor. I mean, you have a debt owed to you, right?
Yeah.
So with Black Box, there's no debt owed to you. You legally own part of the revenue rights that are assigned to you. Right. So if you don't get paid, you can take action on that.
Right.
But and you can on any debt. I mean, let's face it. But anyway, so the point about Gilligan's Island is, let's say your grandfather was the cameraman on 50% of those episodes. And had this business model existed then you'd probably be pretty happy today because those are transferable rights. They're property.
Right?
So
it's
maybe
like
you're
shares
the only
or
grandchild and he passes away and wills you his revenue rights. And Gilligan's Island is just doing great business out in streaming, right?
Yeah. Is it even, as the funny thing is you brought it up, is it even on the, in
I haven't
any
looked.
sphere? That'd be interesting. Everyone out there,
I'll
go
bet you
look
it
at,
is.
go check out Gilligan's Island. If you don't know what it is, it's what is it? They all set sail in isn't that how it goes? Something
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
a 3-hour cruise.
Exactly, 3-hour tour. Yeah, cruise, whatever. Exactly. Yeah, I always confuse that with the Titanic. They thought they had a ship that the water wouldn't go. Anyways, sort of like almost the same song. But anyways,
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So that's cool. So you've got this kind of create, and obviously, you know, as I said, we're kind of putting together some stuff with backers, and you know, there's sort of synergies. A lot of you talk about the democratization. You know, we're talking the democratization of securities and capital, and the sharing type economy, and that's sort of how backers is addressing the business side, the entrepreneur side. But this is almost like that next step, right? It's like now there's the content, right? So you know, the sort of the NFT side of things, or you know, different ways. And I'm sure, not to bore people out there with our conversations, but where do you see, what are some of the thoughts? I mean, you guys have, give us some numbers. How many users do you currently have? I think this is an interesting part. Yeah.
Well, let me address
what you've done. Yeah.
Let me address the democratization thing. I don't really believe in that. Democracy is a political concept. It's not a business concept. Democracy
sharing,
has no place in business.
Sharing, more so the share.
What I call it is egalitarian micro-capitalism. Okay? So
everyone's going to have to define it. Egalitarian, what was it? What?
Micro-capitalism.
Micro-capitalism.
So anybody can play.
Yeah.
And within the construct, you are a micro-entrepreneur.
Right.
Okay.
Or investor.
Micro-investor, micro-partner,
right.
And it's a capitalist model, but capitalism has become the playground of the billionaires, right?
Right, exactly.
It's harder and harder to be a capitalist at these lower levels. But when you aggregate people into teams of micro-capitalists, you can play that bigger game.
Right. I like it.
Because it's a group, right? So it gives you safety in numbers, as long as the community is solid, as long as the rules of the community are clear and observed. It's very, very important. There's this book you should read. It's called This View of Life.
Okay.
It's brilliant. It defines how group rules should actually function to be effective. And I've spent a lot of time studying it. So anyways, the future, right? Well, okay, so if the blockchain is a place where content will live as fractional NFTs, and there's a way to monetize that within the current distribution model, right? Along with the actual thing maybe being sold to the highest bidder. Yeah, that's a really cool concept. And I know there are some creators that are definitely hopping in, definitely doing well. We're going to see whether this is Dutch tulip disease soon enough. We don't know. It could be just hype and hysteria. It may not be sustainable. It may be sustainable, right?
Well, that's one form of distribution of the content, basically, right? And yeah, there's definitely. I mean, we're in that space, and I would definitely say there's definitely overhype on some of it because it is new. But the underlying technology of what it can accomplish from a collectibles or creative perspective is definitely, you know, it can't be denied. But so egalitarian. So another thing a term we use is peer-to-peer, right? So I'm not a huge fan of the democratization concept either. I think it's not wrong, but I think the peer-to-peer is, like you said, you're taking away sort of the middleman. Now everyone can kind of participate in all aspects of the business, from, as you said, the formation, the creation, and then the sort of distribution, and then the remuneration, right, of the steps of the process.
Well, those middlemen are actually key players, but they become partners, right?
Right.
So that's a different stance.
Exactly.
Right. So they become part of the partnership ecosystem that we're building. And, you know, it's interesting. There's rev share deals all up and down the line then, right? So the waterfall isn't strictly, you know, carve. And then, because right now, the value chain in content creation is creators are over here and they're the hired help. Everybody else is over here and has a value chain and a waterfall.
Right.
but the waterfall stops.
Before.
The waterfall stops before the creators in most cases.
Right.
So they're sequestered over here working at 35-year-old rates. So it becomes more of a labor equation, right? And we want to take that labor equation out of it, because there are very few, unless you're, you know, a unionized guy and you're a Teamster in LA and your dad was a Teamster and your grandpa was a Teamster and your great grandpa was a Teamster. I mean, there are family legacies there of people that, you know, that drove the golf cart on the studio lot, right?
Right. For the Wizard of Oz.
And totally, like, I mean, that exists, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, father says to son, you got to get in the union, you know, and all of that. And those structures still exist for sure. And, you know, we definitely will have some challenges operating around those structures. But so far, to answer your question, we have almost 60,000 members.
Right.
We have 2.5 million media assets under management today.
Right.
We are dealing with several what we call retail entities out in the marketplace. This is for the stock footage commodity that we deal with.
Right.
And we just proved that we can build higher order content from those elements in a partnership model. Right. And that film is called 2020, the year that stopped the world. It is a zero budget feature length documentary.
Right. Which I think is amazing. I think it's amazing that this is what I was sort of referring to. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's a stakeholder. Everybody is a partner who is involved in it. And it has now, we are about to finalize deals with a digital distributor to be named.
Right.
Can't say today because we're in the middle of the deal. And
right.
we're also in final stages of a deal with a global distributor for non-digital markets.
Right.
Because cable is still a thing. I mean, it is, right?
Right.
So this film could be seen one day on CBC or on, you know,
wherever, HBO. Korean television. It's interesting. And so that was, so one of the things that we've talked about, obviously we've had a number of conversations, and just a side note, I mentioned the Wizard of Oz. I saw this somewhere, maybe, and again, probably saw it on YouTube or Facebook or TikTok or somewhere. So I'm not sure how reliable this is, but apparently the Wizard of Oz, and one of my favorite movies of all time, you know, kind of growing up as a kid, the Wizard of Oz is based on late 1800s, early 1900s. There was a debate around silver and gold, and or what the underlying you know, the kind of move away from the gold standard, or the move towards this apparently like silver gold standard. So it's actually the Wizard of Ounce, right? Like gold, right? So ounce, and apparently Dorothy represents the public, the naive public. The Tin Man represents the steel workers who had no heart. The Straw Man represents the farmers who had no brain and were giving everything away. And I guess the lion was the whatever, had no courage. And I forget what he exactly represented. And then the wizard represented the politicians who were smoke and mirrors.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So and then the Wizard of Ounce, right? Oz, right, was actually around gold, like, you know, the measurement ounces. So anyways, side note, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Well,
it's a great aside, right? Because what we're talking about here is the relationship between sociology and economics, right? I mean, which are linked, you know, university courses when I was going to school.
Exactly.
You know, they're social sciences, right? So, you know, sociology was, you know, there's a lot of really interesting parallels. When you just go back to, you know, Marx and Engels, for example, and take the whole communism thing out of it. The problem they were trying to solve was the plight of the workers in Manchester and Liverpool and industrialized England. You know, they were trying to solve that problem. And, you know, it certainly was never that bad in the content creation industry, but you hear horror stories. I'll tell you one. There was a man named Jerry Gonelli who just passed away. He was the drummer for the Vince Guaraldi Trio, and they did Charlie Brown Christmas, in 1963. Right. The biggest selling jazz album of all time. And he was
Okay.
paid something like $150 to do the session
Right.
in San Francisco in 1963 by a production company.
Right.
And Vince Guaraldi held the rights forever, and his family. And it was only I've seen Jerry perform twice. He comes through and tours Charlie Brown Christmas. And it was fantastic. And he was in his 70s, early 80s when he's doing this. Anyways, I met him and I talked to him. And I asked him, you know, did you ever get any royalties? And he goes, yes, I did. And he pressed the case for years and years and years. And at some point, he got a judgment saying that he was entitled to some royalties. So his family got some of that back end revenue. But can you imagine? Yeah. I mean, this is a trio. It's 3 people in a studio with a sound engineer and a producer. And yes, Vince Guaraldi was the composer. No argument about that. But under the conventional methodology of the music industry, it's the music writer, the composer, and the lyricist that get the lion's share of the publishing royalties, right? Right. If not all. But there were other people involved in making that content. And I used to be a musician, so I know this story quite well. Right. Right. And so I always thought to myself, when I was really young, that's just not kind of fair, you know, right. Because, you know, you take a look at an Aerosmith record and there's a brilliant guitar solo, but he wasn't the composer or the lyricist on the tune. So he gets, but it's that guitar solo that everybody recognizes immediately, right? Right. And you're just going, okay, so wouldn't it be better if all of these creators that made this product were treated in a more equitable way? And that's really what Black Box is all about. Black Box is based on my life experience as a creator. Right. I'm saying, you know what? There's a lot of effort going on in here. And yeah, so it's really interesting. So yeah, our next move is into a lot more documentaries. Right. Like we have enough content in our ecosystem to do 1,000 TV shows right now. Right. So what we need to do, yeah, we have the raw content to make 1,000 TV shows right now visually. We have the ecosystem where we probably got enough people in our ecosystem to take on that work. And so we're not pivoting, we're extending our business now that we've proven ourselves in the stock footage realm. Right. And our system works really well. It works really well. We've got people collaborating, splitting royalties, splitting payments, splitting the work. There's no gig fee up front. It's all spec, it's all in kind. And you know what? It just works. It was hard to build. I'm not gonna lie. It was hard to build. I can imagine. And now, now we're going kind of, you know, we're not swimming upstream. You know, we're okay in terms of uptake. But what we find is that a lot of creators, especially guys in Hollywood that have been in this business for a long time, they all know what a deferral is. And the joke in Hollywood is that you never get paid on a deferral. It's just ridiculous to even think of it, right? Right. So what we've done is we have systematized and platformized using platform technology, a deferral. Right. It's a promise that you will get paid fairly, right? That's what a deferral is. But for whatever reason, and then we can say it was big bad producers or whatever that didn't pay their deferrals, but it had to do more with credibility, systematization, proof of concept, reputation. So Black Box is now at a point where we can take our proof of concept into this much bigger content market. Right. So it's going to be a really exciting ride. Interesting. Yeah, and I look forward to being a part of it as we work towards it. So it's amazing. And one of the things that I thought was kind of cool, I was going to sort of go back and touch on, you talked about the zero budget and sort of the concept around that, where now you can, and I think this is my take on that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is now content can get created, I guess, produced, created, distributed, that may or may not have been created in the past, right? So the bottleneck that was there, right? The financing side, which is sort of the whole concept of backers, right? Is the financing side of innovation has been sort of
there's a bottleneck there and want to kind of open it
Yeah.
up. So what are your thoughts on that side of things, that other than you? I guess I'll ask the question. Do you agree? And yes, you say yes, you agree, right? Or where do we go? What, like, and I mean, how, I guess I'll add to that question. How do you see that maybe impacting content or the creation of content?
What you're talking about is eliminating choke points in value chains. Right. That's really what we're saying. So as opposed to, we got a bunch of assets over here that have to go down this pipeline that narrows to a choke point and connects to another choke point that opens up to another piece of the value chain.
Right.
So what we're really doing is eliminating those choke points, where we're saying there's a free interchange of this meeting that.
Right.
And it's very dynamic, right? There's a term in telecommunications hardware. This is geeky as hell, but I'll use it anyways. It's called a multiplexer.
Okay.
So you can take these connection points and these connection points, and they can all connect to, like, instantly, digitally to each other.
So
interoperability
kind of thing, right? The interoperability. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's like economic multiplexing.
Okay.
And so this is what's going on with e-commerce. And there's going to be more of this going on, right? Mm-hmm. Where the choke points are gradually going to fall off. Well, we've gone through this phase where platforms, right, digital platforms, all had choke points to the capitalists running the show. Right. Not a bad thing. However, what have we seen? We've seen a huge aggregation and concentration of capital. Right. That's why they talk about the 1%. Right. There's always been rich folks, right? They just haven't been that rich.
Right. And relatively to everyone else, kind of thing.
So when I talk about egalitarian microcapitalism, it makes these smaller elemental players. It puts them into that framework at a much smaller level. But I mean, I've already proven it. Okay. When I got started doing this, I was a jobber. I was running a team of 50, 60 people. We were just happy to have work. Right. That was great for us. Right. And we had all kinds of capital assets that we were putting against that, and cameras and building and vehicles and all kinds of jazz. And it was fun. I mean, it was exciting to do that. We were always chasing the next deal, always chasing the next production. But at the end of it, all we had was the gig fee. And once the gig fee was spent, if that thing was still making money, we didn't get any of that money. Right. It went to the rights holders. So my first experience was I do wildlife cinematography. It's a professional hobby. Okay. I do it at a professional level. So I create content in really cool spaces. And I did a polar bear shoot where it wasn't a gig. It was more of an opportunity to do a video for a partner. Okay. And I kept all the raw footage. So that gig would have been worth maybe 10 grand tops if it was a gig, just a service delivery, right? No problem. Here you go. Here's your stuff. Instead, I've made 10 times that much money from that footage in the past 8 years. Right. And it's still coming. I made a sale yesterday, about $300 came into my bank account from that footage that I shot 8 years ago. Wow. This is what I'm talking about. Yeah. Trickle revenue, it's additive, it's passive. It is the best thing ever. Right. And when content creators taste this, they just want more. Yeah. They just go bonkers. Why? Because they don't answer to a boss. It's not a gig. Yeah. Right. They can, if they're working in a team, they have to show up and they have to do their job, but it's softer. Right? It's less onerous. It's less restrictive. And you can actually do the stuff you want. Now, we're already seeing this in YouTube. YouTube's been around for 15 years, 16 years. I mean, YouTube artists do that, but they're starting to apply the gig mentality to their YouTube channels, where you've got, famous YouTubers are hiring people at the lowest rate that they can get them. So they're treating it like a gig economy thing. Right. Where we say, look, if you want to do YouTube videos, do them as a team, split the rights, we'll manage it all, right? and move on. Because in the early stages of doing this work, you don't have to finance your channel.
Right.
You don't have to beg, borrow, and steal. What you do instead is you share. It's a sharing economy.
Sharing economy. Exactly. No, I love it.
Anyways, it's lots of fun. We're having a good time.
Awesome. It's funny. One of the things I was just thinking, and I appreciate you joining me, Patrick, is and I have one other question, but I have just one very quick question.
Sure.
Who decides, and this is probably, I think, a question for the ages, who decides, I think you gave a term, what was it? The assistant AC? Was it the assistant?
Yeah, the first AC.
The first AC. I guess the A was the assistant. The first AC, yes. Right? Who decides what the first AC gets and what the, like, where in your experience, right? And because obviously there's always got to be sort of somebody sort of spearheading, I would think, something along these lines, right? So maybe there's multi-part. Who decides? We obviously know kind of who maybe spearheads it. They probably have the most influence. Are you looking to maybe set up best practices as far as like what maybe where sort of, because I could see it being where the typical rights holder in the traditional sense would hold 90% and they would expect everyone to do everything for 0.01%, right? Or, so that first AC might get 0.01. And if you go the other end of the spectrum, now they were getting upfront money, but now they're maybe even getting less back end money. And they're also now taking on some of the risk. Like what is maybe a thought process that you guys have around how you can kind of alleviate some of that? Although obviously markets will play the way they're going to play. What are your thoughts kind of on that? Like, how do you create that equity or equality, I guess, not equity, but equality?
Well, so the objective is to have things being done in a fair and equitable manner based on industry norms.
Okay.
So we generally will apply North American norms because rates are pretty much consistent
across the board.
No matter where you go. It's a little cheaper here in Canada, which is why we have so many films being made here. Tax credits, currency exchange, and rates.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a penny is on the dollar, right?
Those are
the US dollar. Yeah.
And that's why Americans do produce a lot of content in Canada. There's less Canadian content being made, but we hope to change that, right? Using this business model. As a matter of fact, I've got a feature film that we're going to be filming in November, if all goes well, which is based on this business model. And we're just going through this exact process. Who decides? Well, the first thing you do is you team, and then you rate the value of each person's contribution at the head end of a project. And then there's a reconciliation at the back end of a project when it's complete. So that first AC, who might be worth $400 a day on a film set in Toronto, he comes out for 10 days. The overall paper budget of the picture is $500,000.
Right.
So he's on set. Let's say he makes $500 a day. So he's got a $5,000
allotment towards that
$500,000 budget.
Right.
So he's getting 1%.
1%. Right.
So that movie goes out and does $2 million of net royalties to the producer, who is Black Box. And we say, great, this guy just got $20,000 for
the 1%,
rather than $5,000.
Right.
That's the simple example.
Okay.
So yeah, it is extremely complex yet simple.
Right.
So yes, those are the best practices. Those are the norms that we need to apply. So when people start projects, we'll generally do a vetting phase with them and say, look, this is how this works. You've got to be fair, right? Because we don't want people being taken advantage of on this platform because of their good graces.
Right.
And we won't allow predatory business practices at all. That's not the point.
Okay.
And so, yeah, there's the human element. That's the human element.
So some oversight definitely in what's happening then on your platform.
Yeah. And that's all part of how we structure our fee and what we get, because we're partners too.
Right.
There's no money up front. There's none of that. We are taking a back end share as well. We are stakeholders. We're there to do all of the organization upfront, logistical, communications, planning. That's what our platform does. We've got some really nifty tools in there that really help people get their job done.
Right.
And then we are the rights holder manager in a legal framework. And we are also the paymaster forever, right? So
right.
We're not going to do this at a deep discount because we need to be around in 50 years to pay the grandchildren.
Right. You know what? I just thought of this, the 3HL Hockey League. I know we're talking about backers and we've had many conversations. I would love to see how Black Box could produce 3HL events, live sporting events, bring in all the production, bring in, and we could do some sort of, joint production type for all of the live streaming and events and content, promo and all of that sort of stuff. So that'd be interesting to kind of get that together and see what we could do from a live sporting event. That'd be something. So just popped into my head as we're sort of talking about some of the things you were doing. Well, Patrick, I really appreciate you joining me here. Where can everyone find you? Obviously, blackbox.global is the site. Where else can they find you personally?
They can find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
LinkedIn, Pat McGowan, I think, is my handle on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, patmcgowan.967.
Okay.
I still use Facebook quite a bit.
Okay.
Patrick W. McGowan, I think, is my Instagram handle. But my personal email is patm@blackbox.global.
Okay, perfect. And does Blackbox have any social accounts, media accounts? Aside from the website?
Yeah, we're not particularly active, believe it or not, in social. We run our community group on Facebook. But you have to be a member in order to get in there.
Right.
So, I mean, in terms of our business, in terms of our growth track, we hit the 60,000 member mark within this one market segment.
Right.
And now we're consolidating everything and ready to attack this new market segment. So we think we're going to go through some hockey stick growth over the next 1, 2, 3 years. As we move into this much broader market availability.
Yeah.
And like any other business, we want to make sure we're getting it right. We want to make sure that our product market fit is as ideal as it can be.
Right.
And it's looking really, really strong. The reaction that we're getting from, industry veterans in LA is extremely positive. So
awesome.
There's a lot of excitement. So it's going to be a fun ride.
Awesome. Excited to be, we're going to continue conversations and get you guys on backers. So excited to be a part of it. Pat, I was calling Patrick. I should just call Pat, but I was One final question, one word, one piece of advice. If you could sort of give to a younger you, somebody coming up, somebody, we didn't talk about your entrepreneurial journey, but I'm sure it's been many, many years in making, kind of alluded to it a little bit.
It has.
What would that one piece of advice or one word kind of be?
I'll put it in a phrase: follow your dreams and make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's.
Yes, I can attest to the second part of that for sure. The first part, obviously, I think is a no-brainer, but the second part is the lesson you learn often from your mistakes that you've made, right? So, great advice.
I think what I'm saying is, a lot of entrepreneurs are, brilliant, and they are trailblazers, and they're rule makers and rule breakers, right? But there are some inalienable rules that you need to play by, and the sooner you realize that and learn those, the better.
Right.
And I mean, I'm a mature guy. I've been around for a long time, and so I'm still learning those things.
Right.
But, entrepreneurs are great because they're kind of like, let's just do this and then we can fix all the problems later, right?
Right.
Which is great. It's a great, and, we certainly did that with Black Box. I wouldn't tell anyone not to do that. But just listen to your experts, listen to the professionals, do a lot of research, while you're dreaming, keep your feet on the ground and be realistic, and,
Right.
and be humble,
Right.
don't get a fat head, be humble. We're just people.
Yeah, no, that's very, very sage advice. Definitely the be humble part. Keeping your feet on the ground, but your head in the clouds is definitely, there's a lot. I think we could probably have a whole other conversation about talking about, life lessons as an entrepreneur. So, but Pat, really appreciate you joining me. Look forward to continuing the conversation. You know what, we should definitely jump on maybe in a few months once we get things rolling with between Black Box and backers, and we can do sort of an update on where things are going and see where we've gone from there. So cool. Yeah. Awesome. Again, everyone watching One Take, powered by backers, Justin Fox, Pat McGowan. Pat, thanks for joining me. Everyone else, I will see you guys again soon. Pat, thanks. Bye, everyone.
Have a good one.
Bye, you too. Hey there. Welcome to One Take, powered by backers. Right?
No judging.
Yeah.
No judging.
The millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby.